space bucket astronauts, which is a term I came up with to refer to these very common, low-cost, plastic cast astronaut and space toy sets. They usually come packed into like a bucket or a carry case with a handle, or at least they did when I was a kid, and I had one, and I was born in 1967, so these things had been around since the early mid-70s. I probably would have had mine in 1973 or 1974. After 1974, it was all G.I. Joe with us. And the space stuff kind of got left behind for a few years. But this is a collection of many things, actually. The basis of which is a space bucket playset that I bought used. It had mostly white astronauts, a couple of gray astronauts, the two vehicles, a space shuttle, which is weird, although, you know, it's understandable. Space shuttle never went to the moon, though, guys, so you're kind of confusing people there. And the remnants of a space station, we'll take a look at those in a minute. But their value as collector's fodder is negligible, because they are so common. But I'm fascinated by them, like I said, because I had a set when I was a kid. Here we're looking at a row in what I call the rope and triangle pose. Whatever tool that's supposed to be, I don't know. And we're actually looking at 4, maybe 5 different companies. Here's the original Marx Spaceman guy, and often the space bucket dudes and their forms are attributed to Marx. I don't think so. Maybe the vehicles, the early vehicles like the Lander, I'm not sure though. But you can definitely tell that there's a difference between the Marx guy in blue and the space bucket guy next to him on the right. The company that they're usually attributed to, I don't know if I already said this, is Hing, which is currently based out of Hong Kong with their production facilities on mainland China. And when they started producing them is unknown. I've found still sealed, mint on card, new examples of Hing space collections that have the flag and I think the rover, but in it are Marx copy guys, and they're said to be from the 1970s. And I know that I had a space bucket set when I was a kid. Whether or not it was this particular style of figure, I don't know, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. To me, made in Hong Kong usually means that the toys were made up until about 1972. Made in China usually means that they were made 1973 or more recent, and it had to do with how Chinese export laws changed in 1972 or 1973, or at least that's what I understand. And the majority of these, which have the space bucket form, are marked China or made in China. And one of the mysteries are these larger figures here that are cast in a softer plastic and are hand painted. One instinct suggests that they're the originated form, and then the smaller ones are lower cost production copies. But frankly, I don't know. Here's a blue one that turned up from a vendor in France. When have you ever seen a blue space bucket guy? I had never seen one before and had to snag it. Has no markings on it at all. Next to it is a form made by a company named Boley. It is also marked made in China. The backpack is removable. And it has a date of 1988 on it, and it's definitely using the same pose or style as the space bucket guy next to him, and the blue guy as well for that matter, but is totally differently reworked. And that's one of the things that's frustrating about them from a collecting standpoint, is where does the original or the intellectual property copyright for the form come from? And it's almost impossible to tell. Here's 3 more. A gray guy with a wrench, a Boley guy, again with a removable backpack with a wrench, dated 1988, and then another white space bucket guy. Here we are with the Walkie Talkie, all of them marked made in China. And one thing I tried to do was to show the different kinds of rider figures here to get a feel for how the tradition of this form has taken place. The gray guy is a Marx made Operation Moonbase rider. The blue one is I believe it's a copy by Marx, made in Hong Kong. Next to it is a Boley guy, and the two white guys are from the space bucket set. In the back there are a couple that are broken. I'm using some of the broken examples to experiment painting with, and that's a painted one that I did. There's a painted Geiger counter guy by Marx, another Geiger counter guy by Timmy, and then a group of these Hing fat guys with Geiger counters. And I've got them up so that you can see just how different the modeling on the forms are from figure to figure. The Marx and the Timmy looking very different themselves, and then the Hing fat guy just looking completely different. Their plastic, older plastic, has sort of gone bad. Here's the Legion of Broken Arm Spacemen. I got, I guess, 5 examples of this one. They're holding the briefcase, and 3 of them, their arms snapped, just like putting them in and out of bags or whatever. Wasn't even really putting any stress on them. And one would be tempted to look at that and say, oh, that's just based on the old Marx Neil Armstrong astronaut pose where he's carrying the briefcase, which, by the way, I happen to have here in a 6-inch figure, and it's a mirror. He's holding it on the other hand, so they're not just copying that or the older Marx Apollo look there, where he's got the briefcase still in the same hand as Neil Armstrong, and those guys don't. Speaking of sculpting, that actually does look like Neil Armstrong there. And one of the things that I noticed when I was doing the painting is that it sort of brings out the distinctive facial characteristics of the Hing fat guys. They all have a sort of interesting facial countenance to them that's very different than the Marx guys. There's a Marx dude back there with a grabber tool in a box, and a Boley version of it, and the closest I could find from the space bucket guys in the same form. And there was this guy here in front of the lunar module. He's kind of weird. I don't know what that tool is supposed to be, and I found several online listings of what would be the complete series of these guys, and none of them have that tool. I don't recognize what it's supposed to be. Got out that red flag because it shares the same casting form for the base as the one that came with my space bucket set, although that came with a set of helicopters and army jeeps. So it's the point being that these mold forms have gotten around, even just not as copies, but different companies maybe licensing an original mold form and then making their own versions from it. It's an intriguing mystery. I'd like to learn more about it, just because it was something that I had when I was a kid, and I remember I definitely had that lunar module, and I definitely had that lunar rover. Whether or not it came with Marx style figures, which I had as well, or these Hing fat guys, I can't remember. By the time they were trashed, I was still too young to have been able to discern between the different styles, and now trying to figure it out, pick up the pieces. Oh yeah, these are the other 2 vehicles that my set came with, a space shuttle. I hate this space shuttle program. I'll make a video about that sometime. And it also came with the 2 solid boosters and the fuel tank, and I guess if you stick the wheel in there. So it got dropped a couple of times by whoever owned it at first and fell apart as they tended to do. And then also these more interesting, sort of generic forms that I guess would make up a space station or something. That's the best I can do with it, because the numbers that I got were incomplete, but that plus the 2 booster rockets, which can be, rockets are rockets, as I like to say. And the tank, I guess the tank could be used for something that would be turned into a big bomb, which it was. Anyway, I'm intrigued by this forum. I'd like to know more. If anybody has any specific links to anything other than the current Hing website, I'd love to see it. One of the issues that I'm having is that there is almost no reference material for the forums online. Maybe I should even let's pull everything out that isn't specifically Space Bucket. Try to do it without destroying anything. I guess we'll leave the big guys in. There's another Marx. There's a Boley. I'll pull my painted guy out. Those 2, I think the rover crew, they're stuck in place. And we lost one. There he is. Pull these off to the side. So there's some odd giant guys and a blue one stuck in there. But that when I say space buckets or whatever, that's what I'm referring to. These guys and the very uniquely shaped toys that came with them. I've never seen a lunar rover shaped quite like that, and there is no other Lunar Lander like this one. I'd love to learn who originated the form, where it first turned up, and attribute accordingly. I'm going to get back to making some art with them. Yo! I forgot to make note that this playmat itself is attributed to this company, Awesome Kids. And there's their, attempt at copywriting it. I've seen it around. You've seen all this stuff around, and that's why nobody takes it seriously as a collecting form. I'm trying to. I'd love to find out what the story is with the big guys. Did they come before? Did they come after? Were they done by somebody else? Nobody